I'm about to blow your mind because I want to lead people in the songs that say, I love you, Jesus. And he's like, okay, first, oh, shoot.
I've never heard anybody that's pursuing a career in Christian music ever say, I laid it all down to go be with the poor.
If we're not looking after the orphan, if we're not looking after the widow, it's pretty hypocritical to get up and be like, join with me.
Right.
I love you, God.
Yeah.
Do you?
The next great revival that we're going to see in the coming days is in the arts.
I hate saying the word because it feels cliche in my brain, but what I keep hearing is,
Hey everybody, this is Rita Springer. Welcome to the Rita Springer podcast and another episode of Worship is My Weapon. Today, my guest is none other than the great Chris McClarney.
oh, I'm not great.
You are. You're the greatest. Chris lives just down the street, another
do.
great human being that lives kind of like my neighbor.
There's a ton of great human beings just right down the street.
I know. I actually really, that's what I love about Nashville is that in the 5 years that I've been here, I'm like, oh, I love these people. You know, I don't think I've ever lived in a place where I'm like, oh my gosh, I love these people.
Yeah.
You know, that you want them at your house. When you see them in the grocery store, you're like, hey, what's
Every
going
time
on?
I come to your house, you have the best people here too.
Oh, I
All
love
your
that.
friends are the best.
Oh, well, I love having parties. You've come to a couple parties. Good parties, not
Yeah,
like
good
out of
party.
control.
No, not debaucherous. Not like P. Diddy. Hello.
No, no, my parties are kind of clean. I wanted to have you on here, but then especially we did this little thing a couple weeks ago, and I just was like, I have got to get Chris on the phone. We did like a songs and stories thing, but you're one of the most fascinating guys, and you would probably never call yourself fascinating. You're not only an incredible songwriter, an incredible worship leader. You've been on staff at a church for years doing worship. But I think there are nooks and crannies about you that people don't really know that I find the most fascinating about you. And I know that we kind of cracked into some of your generosity journeys. I want to talk about that. But I also want to talk about what you're doing in this whole new idea for musicians. So there's a lot to talk about.
All right.
But I want to start with, I don't really know how you became a worship leader, how you became a songwriter. Like, what's the story? What's Chris's story?
Well, I grew up here in Nashville. And at a real, like when I was 5, my dad was a Southern Baptist youth pastor.
Oh, okay.
And when I was 5, I would sing to the wall. I just love to sing. I just still, like, if you said, why do you do what you do?
Yeah.
I just like to sing. It's my favorite. It just makes me feel happy.
Yeah.
And so I like to do it for God. I mean, obviously. But I grew up Southern Baptist youth pastor's kid. I loved music and kind of always had a dream. Like one day I want to do music. And when the opportunity showed up, I started pursuing a record deal. And I went down to Integrity Music. And I was about 18 at the time. And I had started leading worship because I was 14 and at a home group for church, like a youth group. And they said, does anybody here know how to lead worship? And I just figured it couldn't be that hard. So I raised my hand. I was like, I know how to lead worship. And I bought...
Southern Baptist, though, like, what were you cutting your teeth on?
Well,
as a kid in worship?
I'm about to blow your mind because my worship leader,
Yeah.
like the people that let me and taught me how to do worship are Travis Cottrell and Benji Cowart.
Oh,
so Travis
my gosh.
was my main church worship pastor. It was Two Rivers Baptist over by Opryland. And Benji Cowart was... him and Jenna led worship for the youth group. And when they left to get married and run off to New York, I took their place as the youth group worship leader. But they'd let me sing background vocals. I mean, it's all, honestly, if it wasn't for Benji, if it wasn't for Travis, I wouldn't be doing this. I know.
Wow.
It's awesome. But yeah, I mean, back then we were doing, I'll tell you the whole story. It's fun. We were doing I Want to Be in the Light, just straight radio songs. But it was just about getting the youth people to sing and have
Yeah.
fun, right? And a buddy that went to the youth group, he was a youth leader, died in his sleep. And now, my dad being a youth pastor, we moved like every 2 years growing up. I guess I missed the sermon where they were like, hey, miracles don't happen anymore. And so when this guy passed away, I was like, guys, we should pray that he's raised from the dead. And they were like, yeah, we should. Now, growing up Baptist, we do pray like for grandma. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, like, I've raised my hand for many an unspoken prayer request, you know, and we pray for those in the moment. I think that typically there's just no belief behind, like, there's no like, oh yeah, this might actually happen.
Yeah.
It's just like, God, please help my friend's grandma. But this was such a big event for me. I was like, we should pray for this guy.
And you
like,
really literally were
yeah,
like,
well, I just,
what if God does it?
yeah, like what if we pray for this guy and like and I had fallen in love with the whole worship and that's more of the like side of church where you're wanting to just feel like I want this to be real. I want to feel God. Anyways, I was like frustrated because we did pray for him in the van, like in a church van on a trip. And we prayed that he'd be raised from the dead together, and he wasn't. But I was like, we should go lay hands on him. And they were like, I don't know, man, that's weird. But I went and I started asking friends, do you know any of the people that fall over when they pray? Because I knew from TV that those people believed that when they prayed, stuff would happen.
Wow.
And I started asking, like, do you know anybody that falls over when they pray? You know, and Benji Cowart, he said, my brother falls over when he prays. He goes to a crazy church up in Hendersonville. He's the worship leader up there. And I was like, well, I need to meet your brother. And it was around Halloween. I remember we used to do this Christian haunted house where we'd try and scare people into heaven.
Oh,
it was
gosh.
great.
Oh my God, Chris.
And he said, I think my brother's coming one of these nights. I'll introduce you. And I met his brother, and I was like, bro, can you teach me how to like pray and all that stuff?
Stuff happened.
And he goes, yeah, you should come to my church. Well, I went to his church of course, charismatic churches don't meet on Sunday or Wednesday. So it was an easy crossover Saturday night.
Yeah.
So I went to his church, and Don Potter was leading worship.
Oh, gosh.
And they didn't have anyone to run the actual like transparency slide things.
with the little plastic sheets.
Yeah, and the little like arm that sticks
been
up.
there, done that.
And because I was the guest of the worship leader, he had me show up during their sound check. And the guy to run the sheets didn't show up. And he's like, dude, would you do this? So my first experience with charismatic worship, I'm sitting on the stage. Because remember back then, you'd have to be like middle of the stage.
Yeah.
And I remember Christine Potter's dancing around me. And I was like, this is fascinatingly weird. But I was hungry. I was so hungry for God. And so they prayed so hard for me, like so hard. And I received so hard. I wanted it, and nothing happened. I felt nothing. I didn't fall over. I didn't speak in tongues. I wanted it all, and nothing happened. And but I had all these questions. I was asking all these questions of Benji's brother, Mike, who has since passed away. But just shouting him out too. He taught me how to lead at charismatic churches.
Wow.
But anyways, I was asking all these questions about, well, what is it? What are you praying for when you say, well, we're going to pray for the Holy Spirit to fill you up? And he said, well, like right now you pray and you feel like nothing happens. And he said, when you ask the Holy Spirit to come and inhabit you, then what happens is when you pray, you have the power of the Holy Spirit behind you, right? Mm-hmm. And he says this, and that's what I wanted. That's what I wanted. I wanted to pray for my friend that had died.
Yeah.
And so I received hard, nothing happened. But went back and I started leading worship more often. And Benji moved off. And over the course of about 6 weeks, I started leading worship and weird stuff would happen. And by weird stuff, I mean, we'd be singing like, like, Lord, I lift your name on high.
Yeah.
We get to the end and we just do another chorus. And this was weird because you just normally stick to it.
Right.
And it was weird. It's just like, I'm just going to do it. And I just felt like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to just sing another chorus.
Yeah, just spontaneous.
And then like 2 weeks, 3 weeks into just going for it, this guy in the back during worship stands up and it's like a real soft point in worship. We're patting and this guy stands up and he starts confessing his sins. And he's like, I've been sleeping with girls and I know I'm wrong, like a high school kid. And he's like, and I have to get and then someone else started repenting.
Wow.
And then someone else started repenting. And it went around the room. Okay, so I'm like, wow. Stuff is happening. So I call back Mike, Benji's brother.
Yeah.
And I'm like, bro, do you think it took and I just don't fall over and stuff? And he's like, oh, that's definitely the Holy Spirit. Like, it works. Like, you just don't fall over. And I was like, I love it. I got to bring all my friends. So I took 30 little Baptist kids up to this charismatic church in Hendersonville. And I'll be damned if they didn't all fall over and speak in tongues.
Oh
and
gosh.
I got kicked out. They booted me when I got back to church. They were so mad.
Up there.
They were so mad because they were like, you're going to have to tell them that that's not real. I was like, I'm not going to tell them that's not real. I didn't fall over. I didn't make them fall over. And they were like, well, you're going to have to give us your keys. And
oh my gosh, you're kidding me.
And that started me on this journey outside of the Baptist church into the charismatic church world.
Yeah.
And yeah, which still, to this day, I'd love to fall over. And I've had all sorts of people pray for me. I'll tell you, all the best. I've led worship for all, like, I've had some people, I'll not mention them, like push. And I refuse. I'm like, no.
It's got to be natural.
It needs to be real.
Yeah.
If I'm going to fall over, it has to be real. And still, like, I'll mumble and I call it speaking in tongues, but I don't feel like I've ever had like this, like, supernatural.
Yeah.
Like, it's weird. I've seen it happen a bunch, especially like when I lead and people are like, oh, when you led, like, all of a sudden I could see. That happened one time.
Yeah.
They were like doing one of these with their glasses.
Wow.
And so, like, I've seen the supernatural, but
you've
still,
never had that experience.
It's such a weird.
That is kind of crazy.
But that brings me to trying to get a record deal as a kid, coming out of Baptist church, growing up in Nashville, just like, okay, I know what the next step is. I'll try and get a record deal. And I started trying to write songs. Went down to Integrity, and I was sitting at the table with, what's his name? Chris something, and Don Moen. And we were all, they like were sitting, and they had like, were offering me like, okay, let's talk about this. This is what a deal can look like. And they kind of had papers for me to look at. And and I heard God say, this isn't what I have for you. And I don't hear God a lot. Like, this is one of 2 times, I'll tell you about the other one too, where I actually feel like I heard God like, no. And which is weird. This is all I ever wanted, and it's here.
No.
He says no. And so I'm like, okay, I'm processing it. And on the way home, was this before, did I get paged or did we have cell phones? Anyways, on the way home, I get a message. I think I had a cell phone by then, early 2000s.
Yeah.
get a message from Jeff Dio, and he goes, "Hey man, last night the band broke up, but we have this Sonic Praise event. Could you play with me? Like, it'd just be me and you. We're going to have to go acoustic. It's tomorrow night." And I was like, "Yeah, I'll do it." So I get back and still processing what I felt like God had said. We do half of this Sonic Praise event. And instead of having like feed the children, it was just the venue downtown. The guy that ran it, this guy named Scott McCloud, got up and just shared Matthew 25. Like, basically said, "Hey, what we do here is we give out food and clothing, and this is why." And he, "Whatever you've done for the least of these, you've done for me." And I get this like realization that, oh shoot, I was chasing, like I was saying, "Oh, I want to be a worship leader. I want to lead people in the songs that say I love you, Jesus." And he's like, "Okay, first, take care of my sheep." Almost like a backwards David thing. Like, "Hey, okay, I have this plan for you." And when he said that, when he shared Matthew 25, I met him and I moved down there that same week. I'd love to say I sold everything I owned and moved down there, but I didn't own anything. But I did move down there. And for 3 years, I quit music. I laid it all the way down. I met my wife down there. She wasn't homeless, but she would want me to say that. It's fine if someone marries a homeless person, though. But just to know she wasn't one.
Hey, everybody, I want to take a minute to talk to those of you and encourage those of you who maybe you're planting a church, you're on staff at a church, you're in the children's department of a church, and you run and oversee the curriculum at your kids' division of church. There is some friends of mine that have developed this curriculum that I just think it's the best curriculum for kids' church out there. It's called Amazing Kids. It is a Bible-based, spirit-filled curriculum. I know these guys. They are incredible creatives. Connie and Tyler Bates are the genius behind this, and they just love serving kids and serving God in serving our kids. If this is something that your church is looking for, if it's something that you as a pastor of your children's department is looking for, an enriched Bible-based curriculum to bring to your children's department of your church or your church plant, this is something that I would highly recommend that you do. I fully believe and back what these guys do. My own kid was under it for years, and it's just the way that they're doing it right now is just beautiful. So you can find all that information if you go to amazing.kids, and there's a kind of a special discount code that you can get, or a promotional code that you can get if you type in Rita in the promotional area of that, and they'll give you special pricing on that. But it's something that I just highly recommend. And kids are so important. They're so important in our churches. What we do when we drop our kids off in church and what's happening in the Sunday school area is so important for your children. And this curriculum is one of the best, and you will love it for your church. So check that out. It's incredible, and I back it 100%. So this is kind of blowing my mind because I've never heard somebody tell this story. Somebody that's had pretty good success like you've had with your songs.
Oh, yeah. I'm so lucky.
You wouldn't believe it. But to start off, I just think the word that comes to mind is how internally, spiritually wealthy you are.
Oh.
That you would have started your career out that way. I've never heard anybody that's pursuing a career in Christian music or worship leading ever say, "I laid it all down to go be with the poor and be with," that's just kind of wild, Chris.
It sounds cool, but I was 18. I mean, when you're 18,
Yeah,
you're
but
trying
still,
to do crazy
to
stuff.
be that young.
Oh, you're trying to do crazy stuff. I'm not that cool, I promise.
Well, you've kind of you've maintained a really beautiful heart for generosity, and I think that's
it's
obviously where it kind of started.
Well, and I think it is so important.
Yeah.
Especially for us worship people. Like, if we're not looking after the orphan, if we're not looking after the widow, if we're not looking after the least of these, then man, it's pretty hypocritical to get up and be like, join with me.
Right,
I
right.
love you, God.
Yeah.
Do you?
Yeah. And I think that's such a good message to give out, because I've even thought all the years that I've been doing, this thing, I still maintain all of my integrity and maintain just a deep, deep love for what God loves. And I don't see that. Sometimes I feel like, am I rare?
Well, that's all I want.
You know what I'm saying?
I just want to know what God man. I pray all the time in my little, now that I have a studio, a little ISO booth is so quiet. And I'm always praying. I just want to do what you like. What do you like?
Yeah.
And what's funny is I prayed a prayer like that for years. And somewhere around 2019, I heard God again. And I felt like he said, well, what do you like? What do you want to do? Because I was like, well, what do you want me to do? He's like, well, what do you want to do? He's like, I don't know. What do you want me to do? What do you want to do?
Yeah.
That was a pretty fun season, weird season.
I love that though, because I know the God that says, what do you want to do?
Oh, well, yeah.
And I think sometimes in growing up, I think that religious nature means that we've got to just hunker down and do whatever God says is probably going to make us go to Africa and make us do something we don't want. And I've never encountered a God that would make you do something that you didn't love to do.
I've met a lot of missionaries that have gone to Africa. They all love it.
I know.
They love it. And I wouldn't love it. Why would God send me
most
there?
missionaries kind of choose the area or the country that they actually want to serve because they have a heart for that area.
I think people romanticize Jonah a little too much.
Yeah. Yes.
Like,
yes. Very much so.
Which is weird. Like, oh, I hate these people. I'm going to have to go serve.
Yeah.
A weird way to go into it.
Right.
I think you're absolutely spot on. I feel like God made me to do a thing.
Yeah.
And like the only way to like really truly like combat this thing that God's drugged me through, because I've tried to quit music a bunch.
And then how do you circle back into music, because you lay it all down for that?
Well, so we got married, and you've been in ministry, especially ministry to the poor. It just doesn't ever stop.
Yeah.
And I was like, look, I don't know how to be married. We need to take like 6 months. Let's quit ministry this hardcore, like like 7 days a week. We lived down there.
Wow.
Like, just, people would knock all hours of the night asking for food. I love it. I was young back then, so it was great. But I was like, oh, we can't be married and do this. Let's take 6 months. So we did. And in that 6 months, we had to find a church to go to. And we went to a little church called Grace Center here. And there were like 100 people there. And it was my wife's family her mom had been there in the beginning when it was meeting in a house. She was just part of that church. So I went. And when Brian Smallwood, the pastor there, saw me, he had recognized, we used to do these worship nights at the inner city ministry. And he recognized me from those nights. And he goes, Brian and Jen Johnson had just been to town. And I knew them from the inner city ministry. That's a long story. But he goes, hey, Chris, do you know anyone that can, could you lead like Brian and Jen do? And I was like, yeah, I mean, sure. And I said, let me ask my wife if it's okay, but I'll lead. I could lead next week. And I asked my wife, because we were trying to take a break, like a real, like, don't do ministry. So I was like, is it cool?
Yeah, just to lead some
She was
worship.
like, oh, that'd be awesome. So I was like, okay. And I led that Sunday, and we were so poor, I had sold one of my guitars on Craigslist or via the newspaper back then, probably. And the guy I sold it to had written me a bad check. It was
God.
I only had a crappy guitar. It had a big hole in it. And you know how pastors like to rag on you as the worship leader? Maybe not you. You're royalty. I mean, you're Rita Springer. I would never joke about you. But the pastor was like making fun of my ratty guitar. And I was like, well, my nice guitar I tried to sell. And he was like, well, that's not cool. So after worship, he's like, I mean, it felt like God was in the room. And he goes, he just said, I found out that someone stole one of his guitars. Let's buy him a new one. And he opened up my guitar case and he pushed it to the front of the stage. And people, like I was a busker, were dropping money. And it would have been weird, but it felt like I felt God. I wanted to put money in the thing.
Yeah.
It felt like a really weird moment. Like I wasn't getting the money. And, but it ended up being $6,000.
What?
And they gave it to us. And then they were like, can you lead worship next week? And I was like, heck yeah. Yeah.
Hi, guys. I have found a product called Field of Greens that I just love for myself. I would never sell something on this product that isn't working for me. And so I'm a little picky about that. But I'm also one, as I get older, I just think more in line of health and what's nutritious. And should I be eating that? Should I not be eating that? What should I be doing? How should I be doing it? And so this actually, when it came, it was like, I ask a lot of questions. I've got inflammation in my body. I've got gut problems, and I'm exhausted a lot of times in the afternoon. And because this is all natural and it's basically just pure fruits and vegetables, I have found that it actually really helps in all of those areas for me. I take it in the morning. I take it in the afternoon. And, sometimes when I'm really sluggish in the afternoon, it's just a great little pick-me-up for me. So this product I love. I think you'll benefit from it. If it doesn't work for you, it comes back with a full money-back guarantee. Who doesn't love a money-back guarantee? If you order it today, you'll get a 15% discount and free shipping. So there's a promo code that you use for that, and it's just the word worship in all caps. WORSHIP. So you go to fieldofgreens.com. And then when you're checking out, there's a promo code you enter, worship, and that'll give you your 15% off and free shipping. So remember, it's a money back guarantee. And if you are one like me that at the end of the day doesn't consume natural fruits and vegetables like we should, this is a great secondary choice.
And that turned into 10 years. And that church went from 100 to a couple thousand.
So you were there when Jeff took over.
Oh, yeah. Me and Jeff were buddies.
Okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah. Me and Jeff were buddies.
Wow.
Jeff is like a brother to me.
Yeah.
Like one of my closest buddies. I love Jeff.
Yeah, because that's where I think I met you.
Yeah.
Because you were leading worship there. And that's where some of your songs started.
Mm-hmm. Well,
were you writing with the Bethel crew?
No, about halfway through leading at the church. Honestly, I'd laid down music. I just led worship. And honestly, that's what I love to do.
Yeah.
I just like to lead worship. I don't like the extra stuff.
Yeah.
And I felt like God... Again, that same voice, I felt like he said, I want you to make a record. But God sounds like me talking to myself. Yeah. I feel like I have to explain when I'm saying I heard the voice of me. It's like me talking to myself in my head saying, I want you to make a record. So I'm like, well, okay, I laid this down. So I was like, God, this is such a crazy story. It doesn't feel real when I tell it. I guarantee it's 100% real. I said to God, okay, God, if it's you, then you provide the money. and I'll do it. Because I want to go in debt over a me idea.
Yeah.
And then I forgot about it. And about 2 weeks went by. I went down and led worship at a church in Auburn, down in Alabama. And while I was down there, I get this email. And it's this guy I've never met named Grayson. Still haven't met him. Grayson Woods, I think. For years, I'd looked for him. And he just wrote an email and it said, hey, God told me to give you money. What do you need money for? And I was like, guitar strings, drum heads. And I'm a fun guy. Like I just wanted to make like a lighthearted thing at the end. And so I wrote out like, or you can buy me a car, and I was like, no, delete. And I go, and I pulled the number out of nowhere. I said, if you give me $15,000, I'll make a worship record. And homie wrote back and said, I'll send you 15 grand. And he mailed a check with my name on it for 15 grand. So then I was like, oh, well, I guess God wants me to make a record for real. So I started writing, and I sat down at my desk at the church office like this. And I was surrounded with guitars. I felt so empowered. Like, God wants me to write.
Right.
And I was surrounded by all the guitars I had and capos and notebooks and highlighters and like rhyming dictionaries and whatever else.
Yeah.
I was ready to write. And so all that was left was like a real genuine prayer. And I sat down at my desk and I held my hands out and I just go, Lord, give me the songs of heaven. And what I wanted was like, surely if I like could just hear what they're singing up there, that'd be like the best worship song ever, right? And I felt God show up in the room like realer than I've ever felt.
Yeah.
Like, I was scared. Well, half of me was scared. Half of me, my heart was beating so fast. Half of me was like, woe is me. I have super unclean lips.
Yeah.
Half of me was like, oh, here it comes. I think I'm about to get a heaven song. And so here I'm on the edge of like, and I feel God there. And he says to me, again, he sounds like me, but this is the loudest and realest.
Yeah.
Not audible, but whatever level is right below that. God says, Chris, I already have the songs of heaven. What I want are the songs of Chris. And I just started weeping.
Wow.
I was like, because I thought I'd always written songs. I just thought they weren't good enough. And I kind of always viewed like writing songs as you like discover these things outside of yourself and you piece them together. And if you're clever enough, if you can find the right pieces, and if you're clever, then you can craft a song and it's awesome. And God says, no, I put something in you. I just want you to let it out. Like he's got all the songs he could want. What he doesn't have are the songs I haven't given him yet.
Yeah.
And so I'm just weeping at my desk at church. And I pull out my notebook of all these stupid songs that I thought were so bad. I just did not like them. Because they reminded me, I would never lead any of my own songs at church. I still don't like to. But I pulled out my notebook of songs and I opened it up and I remember crying. I was crying like the kind of cry. and I remember just opening up my notebook and just sitting there with God and going, this is all I have. These are my songs and they're not that good, but you can have them all. I'll give them all to you. And in that notebook were 2 songs that Jesus Culture recorded. One was called Your Love Never Fails, and it went everywhere.
Yeah.
And the only reason why that happened was because again, I'm writing songs because God told me to make a record, but I hate sharing the songs. I feel like leading worship, I never wanted to be like, look at me.
Yeah.
And so it always felt weird to and there's something real like soul bearing about like, here's a song. Like, what if they don't like it?
Yeah.
Do they not like me? And so I didn't want to lead them. And, but we do these like band rehearsals, and at the band rehearsal, they'd be like, bro, we should like at least rehearse one of the new songs. And we'd have the youth group come to the band rehearsals just to hang and, learn about instruments and whatever. And so I led Your Love Never Fails at that, and then they led it for the youth group. They were the first ones to lead it, the youth group at Grace Center. And one Sunday morning, we had someone in town, and the youth were all up front, and they were like, "You got to lead this song." And so I was like, "All right." And the sound guy recorded it and put it on MySpace. And Brian and Jen Johnson heard it, and Chris lived in their basement, and Jen just loved my voice, she said. So she'd have it on repeat. Chris would hear it all the time. And so I get a message from just a random drummer that I met in California, basically. And he's like, "Hey, man, our youth group's like wanting to record a record. Can we record your MySpace song?"
Which that youth group was Jesus Culture.
Yeah, that youth group was Jesus Culture. And
wow, I didn't know any of that.
and so I went out there and became, I mean, from real early on, they were like, "We should make music together. We should make music together." And the short of the long story is that we eventually did. They were like, come on the road, and then I never stopped coming on the road.
Yeah. So were you signed with Jesus Culture for a while? Because that was way before Jesus Culture broke off and became its own thing.
Right. I was never, I mean, this was back when Bethel, like Chris Q still played drums for Brian and Jen. I mean, it was all the same. They were the same people.
Yeah.
And actually, you might remember this. There's for like the hardcore worship people, they're going to go look for this record. But Bethel put out a record. I think their very first record, they put out a record, and it had Your Love Never Fails on it. But they immediately pulled it like the following year because they had recorded so they got so much better at recording. Yes. But hardcore worship people should go find that version. Yeah. Chris Q's playing on it.
He's an amazing drummer.
He's really truly is. Yeah.
Yeah, those were some of the good old days.
Oh, they were the best.
Yeah. So that's where you do you feel a little bit more like as you got going, you kind of knew what you were doing in songwriting?
No way.
Easier, or were you always just...
Well, after success, everything gets easier.
Yeah.
I mean,
after
Your Love Never Fails.
But there is a confidence that happens when you're...
Yeah, I don't know. Now I feel like I have that.
Yeah.
But it took me 20 years to get it because... Yeah. I don't know. I think artists in general kind of have this, and I'm not even really an artist in the real sense, but there is this like, you want to be seen, but I don't know. You're worried about what people are going to think about you, and I don't know.
What in those years of writing, what was your probably best song experience for when you wrote? Like, people would ask me this, and I would say probably just Defender because of all the story around it. Is there a song for you that defines a season more than other songs define a season for you?
I don't know about that, but I know about the easiest write ever was I'd met this new guy at a wedding. I met him at a wedding, and it was like his fiance's sister was getting married, and I sang at that wedding. And it was this guy, Nate Moore, who's was in House Fires and did stuff with Map City. But he reached out at that wedding and was like, can we write sometime? And he was brand new to writing, right out of college. But I was like, sure. And we met at Capitol, and we wrote, and he sat down. I said, well, what do you want to write about? He said, well, I have one idea I want to show you. And he sang the verse to Yes and Amen. Oh, and as soon as he was done with the verse, he goes, what do you think? And I go, well, what if it said, faithful you are, faithful? And then we laughed. So he brought a verse, And then I just wrote a chorus immediately.
Yeah.
And then we goofed off and laughed the rest of the time.
Yeah.
And we ended up having to bring someone in to help us finish it because we just goofed around the rest. But yeah.
I love that song.
That
Yeah.
was the easiest, most like fun one.
Yeah. What about God of Miracles for you?
Oh, that one. It's funny because when you write songs, you don't like, I don't know. I'm a happy guy.
Yeah, you really are.
Especially before 2019, I'd say I was impervious to like bad thoughts. I'm a silver lining guy.
Yeah.
Like the half full cup. It's like 3/4 full for me. Always.
Yeah.
And, I mean, a lot of that changed in 2019. What were we talking? Where was I going to go with that?
Just like songs that define
Oh,
you.
yeah. So
God of Miracles.
I'd written that song for when, I don't know if you do this when you write, but when I write, I'm always like, well, what am I writing for? Like, what is it for?
Yeah.
You know,
It has to be for something.
yeah. So I was like, well, if it's for the church, let me just write for like, I'm going to think of like what I'm hearing at church a lot.
Yeah.
And so at the time I was hearing a lot of like people just desperate for God to do something.
Yeah.
A lot of people were desperate. And I was like, I want to write a song about that. I didn't feel desperate for God to do something. I felt happy about life.
Yeah.
And so I wrote that song just for the church. And fast forward 2019, my wife starts losing weight pretty drastically. We can't figure out why. She's feeling horrible all the time.
Yeah.
She ends up in like the emergency room. She's down to 82 pounds. And we find out finally it's Crohn's. And
Yeah.
but she was covered with ulcers all over. It was horrible. And my youngest daughter, in the middle of this, she said to me, she was like 7 at the time. She said, "Is mom gonna die?" It broke me.
Yeah.
Like it, the question broke me. It like went somewhere deep where I was like, "Hey, it's the alarm I set. It's the." For people listening, I was supposed to be here.
Oh my gosh.
But I was all of a sudden faced with stuff that I couldn't sober
Yeah.
around. And
Yeah.
it threw me into this weird, like, I had a panic attack. I didn't know what that was.
Yes. Yes.
I didn't know what it was, but I had one. And I thought I was dying. I ended up in the
Yes.
emergency room. I was like,
What's yeah.
goodbye world. And I'm weeping in the emergency room, like praying, just like, God, I don't, where are you? And
Yeah.
and I went through that season, and it was just like wrestling with God and like praying the prayers that you don't ever want to talk about later, like that, just yelling at God, like, why, like, woe is me, and hearing God, like, okay, that's fine, like, what else, and and kind of getting to the end of that, and I remember leading worship at church one Sunday morning at Church of the City, and it was hard. We had figured out what was wrong with my wife, so that was good. But we were still in flux, and we had just gotten some bad news about one of my daughters that it was I don't want to uncover
Just
her
heartbreaking,
heartbreaking stuff. And so I found myself leading that song, and I broke. I was just weeping because I was like, wow, this song was for me all along.
Yeah.
And
before that season hit you, you'd already precursored with
which is crazy to think about. It's crazy. It's crazy. Like God is so faithful, and even your love never fails. In that season, I found myself going, you know what? Yeah, he will work this for my good.
Yeah.
I believe that. Which is the honor of writing songs for the church, I think, is that we get to give people these repeatable phrases. I mean, when people leave church, they don't remember the sermon, but they will be humming your
They will be
like
humming that
song.
song.
And if we have nuggets that remind them that, wait, no, like all things work together for my good.
Yeah.
And if there's like a catchy phrase, I think for me, that's the real honor of what I get to do.
Yeah.
I love it.
Which is, it's why I think you're great at doing what you do, because you're so intentional with those things. Like I've talked to so many different worship leaders, and I love the way whenever I'm around you, you are very clear about, this is why I just set out to do this. I just set out to do this. And it's beautiful to have. I love all the different varieties of what we get to do. All of us different musicians do. And, my little journey and genre is, the way I think about it is, the Lord's always like, let's go after honesty, or let's go after healing, or let's go after just the guttural truth of this, and that's kind of my lane. But those of you guys that write some of the best songs that we're singing in church, because there's a lot of them, and not all of them are the best. A lot of them become popular because they are played in to be popular.
Yeah.
But then there are those, like you're saying, that some of those that you've written where you leave humming those really candid, truthful, biblical lyrics that actually they can put the soul back together, which I think is so great.
You have those songs. Defender.
I do. And I think when you have, I probably haven't had the, I wasn't put in intentionally to write songs for congregations to sing.
Right.
I was always like, I want them to feel the Lord and then to burn with Jesus, and that type of songwriting is a little different than,
I love it.
So, but I do think that we need all of that, because there's so many different people. Like to hear that you grew up in kind of the Southern Baptist mentality, but longed for the supernatural.
Well,
it's like,
and even now, that's what I feel my sweet spot is leading it like a Southern Baptist church and taking them somewhere they've never been.
Right.
It's my sweet spot. I love it.
So I think that's what makes you so likable and makes it work, because I think the Lord is he's just so dynamic and so diverse in what he's called us to do. And we're not all called to be McClarney. We're not all called to be Springer. We're called to be what God's called you to be. And I think it's why your story is so cool, because you walked into what do you want to do? I don't know. What do you want me to do? I don't know. What do you want to do? I think those conversations really need to be had, which kind of like with you, Chris, even what you're doing now, I want you to talk a little bit about, you can have success in songwriting. You can know how to write songs for the church, but then the bigger picture is, what is God actually really wanting as we get down the road in our years of like, okay, now what is God calling us to do now? And I mean, I'm further down the road and still having the Lord say, hey, I want you to do this and do it like you've never done before, and flip it over and flip it on its lid. And it takes a lot of work and energy to do that. But there's almost a revival, a personal revival when you do. And I've kind of been in this season where it's like, last year I didn't want to do half of what I did, but when I did it, now I'm like, man, that was one of the most creative things I've ever done. And I'm not going back. What's new? What's left over? It does kind of set you up for this thing. And you are doing very similar to what Bede and I set out to do with Fed by Ravens. And I want to talk about this because I actually prophetically am telling the audience, I think in the next 10, 20 years, this is what everybody's going to be doing.
Oh, I do too.
Because it's just getting harder and harder to do it. And I'm always waiting, and I say this a lot on this podcast and all over the place, but I'm waiting for the next train to hit the side of the church or hit the side of the Christian industry that kind of stuns the industry. And then they all of a sudden say, oh, this is the new way. This is the new way. Because until the train hits, it's like Bethel was a train. Bethel was a train all those years ago that hit. And changed the way that we sang. Delirious was a train that hit. Nobody ever thought we'd sing wordy songs until Delirious walked around and started popping off songs like "Did You Feel the Mountains Tremble?" That was too long of a title back then when they said it. So I think that we are in the process in the Christian music industry in the church. I'm waiting for creatives to hit the side of the industry, to hit the building of the side of the industry. But no, we have to do it this way now. Because it's not that what's happening isn't working. It's that I think God wants to bring it back to an organic quality of honest integrity and raw creative adventure.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So that's why I want you to talk about what you thought and started in this whole kind of making the studio and trying to do this with the point system that is different than how we've done it before. Hey, everybody, this is Rita Springer. Thank you so much for coming in and joining me on the podcast here with Worship is My Weapon. There's a lot of things I'm doing right now, and one of the things that we provide alongside this podcast is a newsletter that we do that we send out to those of you that are subscribed, where I just answer questions and kind of give you information. And sometimes you guys are able to write in with questions that you just are curious about. We love that. We love that interaction. I actually love to interact with those of you that want something a little bit more beyond the podcast. So if that's you, make sure to get our newsletter, sign up for our newsletter, subscribe to the newsletter, and stay in touch with all the things that we're doing here on the podcast in that newsletter.
Well, so I'm like you said, I got super lucky with some songs.
Yeah.
And so I was blessed, money coming in when 2020 happened.
Yep.
I didn't feel like I got less money. I mean, the music kind of stayed the same. And but what was crazy, all my best friends are the band guys that are the guys playing on all the records. And what
Blood, sweat, and tear guys.
What's that?
Blood, sweat, and tear guys.
Oh yeah, like the guys that actually play the music you hear on the record.
Yeah,
like those guys are my best buds. Like they were saying, "Hey, can you pray? Like I'm fasting. I don't know how I'm going to pay my rent."
Yeah.
It's like, wait, you rent a house? Like, how do you get higher on the ladder than you? I won't say their names, but it's like there's nobody higher on the ladder than you.
As a drummer or as a guitar player.
Yeah. How do you not have like a living? How are you not making a living?
Right.
And I mean, naively, I knew how the music industry worked. I mean, I knew that we just paid them, but I never really thought about it. But it kind of pissed me off.
Yeah.
Like when I started thinking about like all the videos of people teaching other people to play like these people's guitar parts, or this one specific drum part, or this bass riff, and literally teaching other people how to do what they're doing. And they never see any money from that. They never see any money from the song. Because the way the music industry works right now is they say, hey, we'll loan you $100,000 to make your record. And in return, we'll keep 85% of the money and we'll give you 15%. Well, you have to pay back the $100,000 off 15%. So the artist has to sell what? 1.2 million before. So you have to sell $1.2 million worth of records before you see $1 from it. Yep. And so the artist isn't getting money.
Nope.
And now I'm realizing, oh crap, the musicians aren't getting money either. And it's really frustrating. Now I'm getting money because on the pub side via CCLI, and because I don't care. I never really tried to be an artist. I just wanted to lead worship at church. Yeah. So it wasn't hitting me like it was hitting my other friends. But it made me so mad. I just started praying about like, well, what should I do? And the truth is, I kept saying like what made me mad was that these are the best guys. And I kept saying when I'd talk to them about it, we could do this. Like, we don't need them. Like, who's taking the money? Like, what do they do to make the music? And I was like, we could do this, like us. And then it started this like dream of what would that look like? And it came down to, well, we just share. Like if one person isn't trying to take the majority, just share.
Just share it.
Which is like crazy. Like if the music industry didn't exist at all,
Yeah.
like then we wouldn't dream this up. Like we wouldn't dream up 15% goes to the people that make the music.
Yeah.
Oh no, 15% goes to the artist that sings the song. Nothing like
goes to the musicians, yeah.
Well, and what people don't know either is a lot of these guys, guitars, drums, bass, keys, they're doing it as favors for their producer friends. They're getting $100, $50.
Right.
You know, we're not talking about a lot of money.
No.
And so what I decided was the only thing missing was a place to record. So I kind of just went for it, and I sold my back catalog of songs. Yeah. I sold all of what I'd written. And here's the thing. I did the math on like what I had done. So I'm looking at my life in like the rearview mirror, having had quote success and feeling real good about like getting $1 million. I was like, this is awesome. And then realizing that like, wait, if I had done this without the label, if I'd just done it with my buddies, same guys, same guys that played on the record, if I'd just done it with them, they'd each have $1 million too. That's the real math of it. Yeah. And it's like, shoot, I'm going to sell and I'm going to redo it. So I sold my catalog, bought a studio, and then now we're just trying to build a framework. Like you said, I think everybody should go to a model where you're like, absolutely. Hey, let's make something and share the reward of it. Yeah. If it blows up, awesome.
Great.
Everybody shares in the reward of, and if it's a massive reward, awesome. Yeah. Like everybody gets a massive reward. And if it doesn't do anything, who cares? We had fun making music.
Right.
So part of the goal of the studio was to make it a place where everybody can record at the same time. So, for the past week, the past 2 days, we've had half of Lauren Daigle's band in there doing like some soul music all at the same time, tracking live like you would back in the good days. And so the drummer's in there at the same time the bass is playing, and they're locking in together, and we're making real music again, like where you're playing off of each other, and the way like feels natural to us because we do the prophetic song thing where you just kind of flow together. But that's not how records have been made, especially the last 5 to 10 years. You basically send them your piano vocal or guitar vocal, and then some guy works up a whole little thing around it, and then they send it to a guy who puts drums on it, but nobody's there. Nobody's like, the music isn't coming out of relationship. And so my thing was, let's make music, let's share it all, let's bank on the relationship, let's bank on. So
essentially, like, the label is not a label.
Well, the goal is that the label makes $0.
$0.
So our first meeting we had was with an organization here in town that does orphan work, the Tennessee Kids Belong.
Yes.
Foster care, and there's 416 actually adoptable, I call them orphans, children in need in the state of Tennessee. In the first meeting we had, I was like, look, if we do it right, there'll be a ton of money. And it's like, what do we do with the overflow?
Oh,
and it was like, let's try and save all 416 of these orphans. So the first meeting we had was with them at the studio. And they were like, well, what'd you call us here for? And it was like, well, we don't fully know, but we have a studio now. We're going to make music, and we want to save all of the 416 of them.
Oh gosh,
like,
Chris,
I just think it'd be so beautiful. Well, they were, well, what was so,
They're like, how are you going to do that?
yeah. And, and I said, well, here's two ideas. And one of them we've already started. One is, look, I know the best songwriters in town. What if no song exists right now. 0 song exists.
Yeah.
What if I go to them and say, hey, would you like to write a song? Let's just take 2 hours together for orphans. Like, we'll straight up give it to them. And so I just convinced some writers to write with me and convince some musicians to play. And the goal is to find some big artists, like big country artists, like, hey, here's the song. We'll record it for you, track it. At the end of the day, all of the money, 100%. Nobody else gets it. Like, and they were like, well, that would be cool. And I was like, so that's one way. But the other way, which you might love this. This is my favorite thing to talk about. I've had this dream for a while.
Yeah.
Which is, as a songwriter and half semi-artist, there's all these songs that I've written with people that I love. I loved them.
Yeah.
And the label was like, no, they're not the best. And I have this dream, because we all have them. All of us songwriters and
Dropbox.
artists.
They're called the Dropbox, lost Dropbox songs.
And I was like, what if they're worth $0 to anyone? So I went to the Capitol guys and I said, hey, what would it like? Is this even possible? If I get the songwriter to give up all their share of the song, would you give up your share of the pub? And they were like, yeah, for orphans. Yeah. So I have this dream that, like, hey, let's record our orphan songs. Nobody's ever going to hear these songs.
Yeah.
They're going to sit on a shelf forever. The same way some of these kids are going to age out of the system. And it's like, what if we, as musicians, just started recording these songs,
right? And
we bullied the labels to give their share of the money to the orphans too. And yeah, so
we just recorded them.
And
set them out,
because we can record. That's the bottom line of the way we're doing music now is we can make a record for $0.
For $0, and people will say, "Well, how do you?" It's like, well, there are points. Can you describe the point? Do you know much about like the whole idea of the whole point system?
Oh yeah.
One song is how many points?
Well, start with 100%.
You start with 100%.
So that's 100 points. The easiest way to describe it. But like we could bring in an artist.
Yeah.
And we could, right now, again, an artist gets 15% and the label gets 85%. Or if they're a big name, they might get up to 25%. They'd have to be a real like big deal, or some people just get distribution deals. There's other ways to work it. But a classic artist deal is, somewhere between 15 and 20% goes to the artist.
Yeah.
We could at least double that to 40, where it's like, look, the artist can now, and here's the other thing about music is the artist usually doesn't own the master.
No.
So like, and the master is the actual recording.
Yeah.
So the actual recording that people listen to, the thing that makes money on Spotify, because Spotify, the songwriter makes like 1 cent for every 10 cents the master makes, which
Crazy.
is
it's insane.
Again, it's the money guys kind of flipping things so they make more money because they own all the masters.
Yeah.
Anyways, we can
Crazy.
get into that.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. Basically, what we're telling you is that the music industry is predatory loan business. And
I mean, it is. It's sad, but it is true.
Well, it is because, again, the artist doesn't make money. I mean,
yeah,
they make all the money until...
Well, and I've signed how many deals? So it's like, we go in signing and then we learn more along the way.
Oh, of course.
And I think it's why with Fed by Ravens, the Lord was like, we're done. And
your latest record's so good.
Yeah, and it's the most creative. It was done
Well, and I
with
got
the
to
spirit
sing
of
with you on the
generosity,
one before, which was
Yes.
a nightmare to make.
which was a nightmare to make in COVID.
Oh my gosh. Well, in
And-
that studio,
Yes.
do you remember how crazy that
Oh,
was?
it was crazy. It was crazy. And I felt like I was supposed to do that as well. But I think even calling a record light in the middle of absolute, complete hellish darkness was
Loved it, though.
prophetic.
I loved it.
And if that's what that was for, that's great. But the whole concept, the freedom, not just in the fact that I wasn't beckoning to a label, which some of them are beautiful people. It's not about that.
No, the
beautiful
people are
labels.
awesome.
Yeah. It's just
It's the principalities.
it's yeah.
I mean, honestly, the war isn't against flesh and blood. It's not the guy at Capital CMG.
No.
Not one of those guys is a bad guy.
No,
the head
beautiful
guy.
people.
The head guy goes to my church. He brings he comes early, serves, and puts the communion out at everybody's seat.
Yeah.
Nobody else knows that.
Yeah.
Like, he's awesome.
Yeah.
He's not doing that to look cool. He loves God.
Yes.
Our war is not against the people.
No.
They're just part of the same stupid
Yeah.
system
It's
that
a
we
system.
are.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's
And-
what
and
Bede, so the day I bought that studio,
Yeah.
the day after, I had a songwrite with Bede, and we had never talked about it. And I showed up at Bede's house for a songwrite.
Yeah.
And he's like, "What's new in your life?" I said, "I bought a studio." And he's like, "What for?" And I just told him my whole plan. I was like, "We can make music. We can share everything." And he's crying. And I'm like, "Man, he really likes this." And he's like, "I'm doing that.
Yes,
Like, I'm doing the
yes,
same thing."
yes.
And now I'm crying. I'm like,
Yeah.
"It's a
Oh,
God
so
thing. Oh my God. It's a God thing."
It's a God thing.
And just right then and there, I was like, "You can use my studio for anything you do.
I know,
I mean, let's just
tell
freaking
me
do
that.
it. Let's
Yeah.
freaking go." And we did drums for one of your songs there.
Well, I think a few of them, Joe came out and did
It's so
drums.
fun.
Yeah.
So fun.
But it felt, sometimes when you have an idea, you don't know what it is. And then it just, whether it works or not, before it's in the process of it, it just feels right. And it feels God because it feels holy. It felt holy. And it felt holy to give players
It feels, yes.
no
it feels
terms
righteous
on their points.
Yeah.
You know what I'm
feels
saying?
righteous.
It's like I can't imagine God not blessing that and being about that. Hey, everybody. I want to tell those of you that are musicians and specifically piano players about something that I've been using that really has transformed and changed a recording process for me. There is a company that I found that I've partnered with that has been lending me this incredible piano bar, is what they call it. It's from Earthworks Audio. You can find them online, earthworksaudio.com. And this is how this piano bar works. As you can see, this piano bar fits inside of a piano like so. I think it would work for an upright as well. I have a baby grand. This bar just sits right in between the piano edges, and it has these two mics. It's a very, very sensitive piano bar. It just sits right in this piano bar, and then it just has this connecting wire that comes out for all the plugins that you would need to plug into your interface. It's super easy. It's incredibly convenient. If you are an acoustic piano player, if you have a home studio and you're looking to mic an acoustic piano, Earthworks Audio is one of your best bets. Check them out online. Okay, so here's a bigger question though for you and what you're doing. What do you need money for? To build the idea.
Yeah, like the part of going into this, because I put a lot of prayer, just saying, God, you're gonna have to help me, because $1 million goes away quick.
Oh,
when
yeah.
you buy studio and gear and all that crap.
Oh yeah.
I keep finding myself going, well, I don't need, because part of it was I don't want to have an investor,
Right.
because then I have another money guy.
Yeah.
It's
yeah.
another money guy.
Yeah.
Like, that's the thing I'm trying to get away from. So I found myself going, well, I don't need it, but I feel like we need money for growth. So I started praying, like, God, what should we do if you provide the money? Like,
Yeah.
I feel like you're saying we need it, so what should we do with it? So I think if we had money, we'd be able to pay off some of this debt I've gotten myself into, creating the label. But more importantly, we could start paying the musicians up front. Because right now, the way the model's working is you donate your time, and if it works, you get paid. If it doesn't work, you don't get paid.
Right.
Great. Now, that's awesome. Like on the grand scale.
Yeah.
On the micro scale, these guys don't have a lot of extra time.
Right.
And they have to play to make money right now, the way the system is. So, I started praying about, like, what would be the wisest thing to do with the money. I think if we had money, we'd invest it in the people.
Into the people.
I mean, of course, studio upgrades as we go. But,
Yeah.
right now, the big thing for me if I had money, I could have people in there every day, all hours of the day.
Yeah.
Right now, we're kind of like, well, when can everyone get off work? Because,
Right.
that you got to have real jobs.
In order to, yeah.
Again, some
To
of
not
these
get
people
paid for something.
that
yeah.
are heroes of
Yeah. These are not bad musicians.
of church musicians.
Yeah.
The heroes. I'm telling you, the top of the top have to get regular jobs.
Mm-hmm.
And that's crazy. And that's what we're trying to fix. But in the meantime, that hump feels like, man, I wish we could take care of them. So it's like, I wish we could give them $200 and 5% of the master.
Yeah.
I wish we could give them, $1,000 a week and,
Right.
5 points on what.
Are you set up for like nonprofit or
Not yet.
S corp, or what do you? Are you?
So right now it's an LLC.
Yeah.
It's just me and one other guy who's the like brain. I have zero administrative skills.
Yeah, you need
And
somebody in that.
So
because breaking down the whole point system
Yeah.
and how it is and administrating all that is a job in and of itself.
Well, and the starting goal was, he used to work at Integrity. He's just a good friend. He plays bass with me at church. And the whole goal was, I just kept saying, could we do it on our own? Like,
Yeah.
because typically you need a lot of partners to put something out. So you need like a distributor.
Yep.
You're going to need a publisher if you're writing the songs. I mean, these are what they say you need.
Yeah.
Right. And I found myself going, okay, let's try and see who can we cut out of this? Like,
Yeah.
what are the biggest pieces? Part of it is administrative stuff. Like,
Yeah.
people trade 20% of their catalogs for just administrative help.
Yeah, all the time.
So we started getting nerdy. I started asking nerd friends, like, is there a different way to do contracts so we don't have to have a person that sits there and goes like,
Yeah.
Is there like, what are the possibilities? And of course there are. Of course there's computer programs. You just plug it in once and it just keeps track of it. Of course there is. Why wouldn't there be?
Yeah.
It's probably what the label's using.
Right.
This is what we're realizing as we get deeper
Wow.
into it. And so then it was like, well, let's form a label that makes no money, and it's just made to support the artist and the musician. And that's what we're trying to do. And if we had money in the bank account, we'd probably give it to musicians and pay off the debt. Because we got a big, pretty console, but it's like $6,000 a month, which is fine. I mean, all of this feels like God told me to do it. So I have zero fear. I told 3 weeks ago I didn't have the $6,000, and I told a friend. He's like, "Well, what are you gonna do?" I was like, "I don't know yet."
Yeah.
Wait, what do you mean? What am I gonna do? I have zero idea what I'm gonna do. Like, God's either gonna do it or He's not, and That's my thing. Even as we lead worship, I don't ever want to fake it.
Right.
I don't want to fake that God's doing it. So it's like,
Yeah.
oh, I mean,
Well, and I think also too, Chris, it's like when you're doing something that feels beautiful.
it does feel beautiful.
Yeah, and feels holy.
Yeah.
I think holiness feels beautiful. That there's something about that feeling that when there's nothing in the bank. I think even experiencing that last year, writing a record called Fed by Raven, when you really were every morning just looking to be fed by
Right.
Raven. There was something so beautiful about that season. And it felt holy. It felt like even with nothing in the bank, it felt like God's about to do something.
I know.
God's about to do something. And I can't tell you the last time I was there and then came through that season with such gratitude of no more fear.
Yeah.
That money is like, really, money's the least of God's problems.
Oh, it is.
When it says it in the Bible, like, I own cattle on
Yeah.
1,000 hills. And it would be easy for us to be like, where is one? Sell a couple, please. But that's not the process God wants you to see. The process God wants you to see is, I have no worry about that. That's the least of my concerns for you. I'm provider. I'm provision.
And the real truth is, if God's spoken something over you, it's gonna happen.
It's going to happen.
And the worst thing you can do is try and make it happen.
Right.
And I think,
Or let worry kill what God's going to do.
yeah. Well, I think of Abraham, and God says to Abraham, your kids are going to outnumber the stars. And he's like super old. His wife's super old. Now, he ended up, yes, it's true. The worst thing he did, though, was he was like, well, I don't know how that's going to happen. So I guess I should get a new wife.
Right,
I should get
right.
Hagar, my slave. And here's the thing. He made Ishmael. And, I don't know historically how true it is, but Ishmael was the enemy of Isaac.
Right.
And it's like, look, if I can avoid making Ishmaels,
Yeah.
then maybe these Isaacs will have a chance to really thrive.
do what they-
and
yeah.
and for me, part of that not holding tightly to the money side, I'm just gonna, is part of that dying to yourself, dying to the worry that am I going to be taken care of? Which is the thing we're trying to combat in the industry of everyone
Right.
trying to get their piece.
Yeah, yeah.
Man.
Yeah, I do think that when I started the Dive Creative School, now over 20 years ago, the word that I felt like God had told me then was, in the midst of raising up and looking and searching for creatives to give them back the creator. Because I felt like the Lord told me that the church
That's cool.
had lost sight of the creator, the artist, God the artisan. And so I went in search of the creatives to bring back the life of the creator. And I mean, Chris, you could talk about, I would see preachers do dinners and raise millions and millions of dollars for their evangelistic campaigns. But I would be like, can somebody just sponsor somebody to go to the school to actually just get alive again and from their trauma and come out in this creative venture? And well, the church seemed to have a really hard time with the artist. The artist makes the church nervous a little bit. It's like the creatives make the church nervous. But then I'm reading the scriptures and I'm like, yeah, but whenever he wanted to get something done, he calls the artisans, he calls the creatives or the Levites, to do the thing. And I'm like, so he those are his first calls. Those are his first people. Isn't that the first thing that church wants to use? And so I had the hardest time finding people supporting creatives financially. And I do feel like that I've never felt it more than in this time. I felt like what I've been petitioning for the last almost 20 years, that we're coming into a season where I really feel like God's going to give people vision. Wealthy people vision, not to want the investment in their bank accounts, but to want the investment in their spirits of having actually released something and watch it actually become and outnumber the stars. Like in that idea of maybe it's not right here that you could see it, but there's something God is doing that's going to be this and this and this and this. If I told stories of what would happen at Dive, I would just sit there with my best friend who ran it with me, and I was like, how are we going to ever tell people what we just saw? Because nobody's going to believe us. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Because it was just the stories that in itself changed the internal soul and the internal structure of the soul through the creative and through the design of what God was doing, because that's actually what he started out doing. In Genesis chapter 1. Spent 5 days doing a really amazing job, and none of that 5 days has ever deviated from the plan. You know what I'm saying? Right. So I think my heart now is to say, especially for those that are out there that are looking for something to sow into, and maybe it's a crazy idea. Like, it's crazy. What we're telling people to believe for, it's crazy. But I really feel like God, the next great revival that we're going to see in the coming days is in the arts. Well, it's going to be in the musicians and the artists and the painters and the...
I hate saying the word because it feels cliche in my brain, but what I keep hearing is Renaissance.
Yes.
Remember when the church was sponsoring the best art? When the best art was coming out of the church. And it was because rich guys were just giving artists money so they could make art. Like, the goal is the art. Whereas nowadays, the goal isn't the art. It's to make money.
No. But we're still talking about those artists in those days.
I know. Because and that's what the goal of the studio, it's called Funtime Studios, is like, let's get back to focusing on the relational side of what we do musically.
Yeah.
Because that's what really matters. How blessed it is when we dwell together in unity. Like, that's the thing that God will bless.
Yeah.
Let's focus on that. Let's focus on making music that we're proud of. And the rest will work itself out. Don't try and make a song for the radio. Don't try and make it for an audience. Make the song that God put in you, and we'll figure it out on the back end. Yeah. And that's the hope that, that can sustain itself. But the truth is, we'll end up needing some real rich guys that float some musicians that need time to kind of get out of a funk enough to be able to make real art again. And some of these guys, I mean, they're the best at what they do, and they just don't have time to do it anymore. Right. And it's so sad to me. And it's like, if we had money, we could get some of these people back.
How do people donate?
We just got a bank account this past week. We filed all the paperwork back in July, got it in early September back from the legal people. And so now we're finally a real LLC. And we don't have... we want to start a foundation for what we're talking about. Early next year is the goal. I know we have Venmo, but I don't know what it is.
Well, by the time the podcast airs, your Venmo will be on here for people that want to sew into that.
Well, I'll say if people want to sew in, I promise that we'll use it for the making art. And making it for the kingdom. And honestly, the more I think about this and dream about it and think about our community, it feels like Acts. Because you think, we joke, Acts was kind of communistic. But really, it says they came together and they brought what they had together. Mm-hmm. And it's like, man, I don't know how to mix a record, but he does. He brings what he has. I don't know how to play drums. He does. He brings what he has. She sings way better than me, so she brings what she has. She's the best lyric writer I've ever heard. She brings what she has. It's like this is the kingdom. This is Acts. We bring our gifts together and out of the beauty of relationship, not product. Who cares about product?
Yeah.
Like there'll be another product next week anyway.
Yeah.
Like none of that matters.
Yeah.
But the relationships matter. And right now, the songs don't seem to matter because they're vapid. This is not a knock on, well, it kind of is a knock on Christian music, but they're made to be a product that recoups money.
Right.
I mean, that's just the truth of it. It's like most of what you hear on Christian radio, as edifying as it can be, outside of some worship stuff,
it's trying to pay back.
It's just paying back what somebody got loaned, and the person's never going to get. The artist you're listening to is not even making money. So it's like, why are we doing this even? And I don't know if you felt that. I felt a lot of that coming out of feeling the success of it, and then like, what did I do? What was all that for?
Yeah.
Like, what kingdom was I building? Because this feels like beautiful. Like, the real kingdom is not one guy keeping all the money. That's stupid.
Yeah.
The real kingdom is, when you even think about tithe, where did the tithe go? It went to the Levites.
Yeah.
The people that were taking care of the, worship of God. And you think, well, now where does the tithe go? And it's funny, you brought up church. The worship pastors make no money. Mm-hmm. Pastors rolling in the dough. That's not, I love all the pastors I've ever worked with. It's just the way the system is.
That it is.
And it's like, what if we got it a little wrong? What if people should be giving just to see art be made for God? No return on it.
Yeah. So good.
What a cool thing to give to.
Yeah.
And I'm taking the biggest risk.
Right. That's right. That's right.
Look, if it doesn't work, I'm the one that fails. This, we're just swinging as hard as we can and praying God does something.
I think he's gonna, Chris. I think it's a new era. It's a new era of maybe God coming and having a blast with music again and having having something to really say. I just miss those days.
I know.
I miss those days of just getting a record and sitting with it for months because you just couldn't get enough of it.
Well, part of what it is all those old records that you remember and you love. It's because they were saying something that wasn't politically correct.
Right.
It wasn't the mainstream thought. Mm-hmm. And it was the fact that it came through music that opened people's hearts. Yeah. And it works. I mean, your grandma telling you that music's going to rot your brain. Right. I mean, it works both ways. Right. You're listening to nasty
right.
music, which I do sometimes. I'm not going to lie. I like getting nasty music. But, it opens you up. And this, as we are making music, just even the opportunity as a community to be able to actually impact society. And starting in Franklin, Tennessee, we could change the way people think about sharing and giving and loving each other. And
I
don't know.
Amen to that. I think that's amazing.